In America, many Christians consider it a point of pride to have as literal an interpretation of their scriptures as possible. From these rigid readings of the Bible come all the controversial subjects of young earth creationism, the denial of marriage rights for gays, the historical context of Noah's flood, Jesus' relationship to the divine, the dismal apocalyptic future of mankind, and a whole host of other messy topics. However, there are plenty of details that even the fundamentalists miss and thus omit from their worldview in their acceptance of the so-called Word of God. This series will reveal some of these passages that pastors rarely teach, as your knowledge and obedience to the Holy Bible is put to the test. Do you ever wonder why Christians don't observe any of the Old Testament laws? They don't sacrifice animals to appease God, they don't keep the Sabbath holy anymore, and they've quit stoning adulterous people and now resort to simply shaming them. Talk to virtually any Christian about this, and you will be told of how Christ's death on the cross saved them from the old ways of the Hebrews, meaning that they are no longer under the authority of the Old Testament because Jesus replaced that system of salvation with a new and improved one. At first glance, this seems to have answered the question, but there is actually one problem with it, and it's that pesky Christ guy. In Matthew 5:17 and 19, Jesus says, "Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. Anyone who breaks one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever practices and teaches these commands will be called great in the kingdom of heaven." Now it is worth pointing out that there are a number of Christians who acknowledge Matthew 5:17 in a very odd way. They will own up to the fact that Jesus did not abolish the law, but in the same breath try to claim that his alleged fulfillment of it has made it so Christians do not have to observe the Old Testament laws. So he didn't abolish it, he just made it obsolete for believers. As absurd as this vain attempt at reconciliation is, it's not even true that Christ fulfilled the law by example. Matthew 12:1-8 has Jesus violating the Sabbath, Mark 7:18-19 has him violating the food law, and he openly dishonors his own mother in Matthew 12:46-50. It could be contended that Christ's death was the fulfillment of the law, but it still seems odd to hold this view when you consider Psalm 119, verse 151-152, which tells us that the Hebrew God established his commandments to last forever. Deuteronomy 4:2 also says, "Do not add to what I command you, and do not subtract from it, but keep the commands of the Lord your God that I give you." However you try to spin it, if Christians are no longer under the Old Testament law, then Jesus changed the means for salvation. He did not just fulfill it, he eliminated and replaced it with something new, something never hinted at in the Hebrew Scriptures. To complicate matters even more, the Apostle Paul states in Romans 10:4 that Christ is the end of the law. So did Christ end the law? Did he fulfill it? Are Christians still subject to its authority? Once again, check out Jesus' words in Matthew 5:19. "Anyone who breaks one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever practices and teaches these commands will be called great in the kingdom of heaven." Whatever you make of the abolish and fulfill wording, this verse is a clear encouragement to observe and obey the Hebrew law. What's the significance of this realization, then, and what does it mean for the biblical literalist? Over the next several editions to this series, a better idea of the implications will emerge. Suffice it to say that it opens up a whole new can of worms.